I built a PC. And its name is Oatmeal 2.0. Went down. Okay, cool. That's meant to happen. Load this bad boy in. 30. Ah! Why did I name it Oatmeal 2.0? Because the old PC was named Oatmeal 1.0. Silly? I do miss that PC. I still have it. It's down here. I mean, it was my workhorse for the past 8-ish years. Maybe even further than that. Some of the components are as old as 12 years old. I had an i7 4770K in there. I had a GTX 760 at one point, and then a GTX 1070. I had DDR3 RAM. It had a DVD drive. The USB ports on the front of the case were only 2.0. Like, I mean, it still worked, but like, I think it's time for an upgrade. Okay, all right. Look, if you're here just for the benchmarks and all the specs, I have the links right over here so that you can go straight to it. But if you're in for a treat, you want to hear my story, stick around. I think the real two big things that pushed me to upgrade was actually Cyberpunk just looked damn amazing. And I bought an NVMe on sale. So I bought an SSD from Western Digital a long time ago for like $70. Moderate deal. I ended up buying this NVMe for about maybe $96. Pretty good. The fact that I bought an NVMe storage with my old ASRock H97M motherboard meant it wouldn't ever work for me. So what's a guy to do then to consider upgrade options? Am I right? I mean, I didn't jump into upgrading just yet. At that time, the Ampere GPUs were about a couple of months old. The Ryzen Zen 3 CPUs were out, and people were still trying to understand the capabilities and whether it was worth it to upgrade. Seeing it dominate all the tech YouTuber channels and builds, it obviously got a fear of missing out, and I wanted to jump in on that action as well. So then I decided to go make some what if builds on PC Part Picker, cruise through websites, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, Craigslist, see how much scalpers were selling their components. And then you spend over $2,500 on components. Look, I managed to get a couple of parts from third-party sellers. One being my Ryzen Zen 3 CPU, the 5600X. I ended up buying it for the moderately priced $350. Now, it goes MSRP for $299, but after taxes, it's like about $25 for a finder's fee. You can keep my $25, buddy. Thank you. A lot of the other components were a lot easier to find, and frankly, I was ready to go. I wanted my 3080. I knew I was going to get my 3080. Now it's just a problem of obtaining a 3080. I was really proud of this design too. I wanted a smaller micro ATX build so I can put it on my desk. I also wanted to have a very clean aesthetic. I wanted a sort of black and white kind of designed concept, maybe with a little bit of RGB to make things pop a little bit more. I think I pulled it off, but obviously there's always ways you can make things better. And no PC would be complete without an RTX 3080. But getting one is no easy task. If you are in the market of buying a component, the Stock Drops Discord, Twitter, just indispensable how useful they are for trying to buy components. I strongly recommend starting there first. If you start getting desperate, there's a possibility of running bots, but
I didn't really trust myself with bots. I didn't know how to really use them and how to make it stop buying it, because I don't really have a lot of money in my bank account, and I wasn't really looking forward to buying all of the stock of a certain place. At this point, I was starting to get a little more desperate, but also a little less hopeful. I was starting to think maybe it is time for me to just build the PC and use my GTX 1070 in the meantime, which is not an unreasonable thing. If you're looking to upgrade your PC, that is probably the best way to go about it, because these prices are pretty crazy right now with the GPUs as of the recording of this video. In fact, I had a lot of close calls trying to purchase some GPUs, and a lot of them would just end up out of my cart, like some crazy online version of Black Friday. Luckily though, on a day during Christmas week 2020, I got really lucky. Really lucky. I woke up with a drop from Stock Drops. Nothing too out of the ordinary, but for Best Buy. I haven't purchased from Best Buy a lot, so I ended up just going with it, and I saw they had an RTX 3090 FE on sale. 3090 being the more powerhouse, but also nearly twice the price. But let's push our luck. That was the only one available, and I liked the idea that it would beat the Founders Edition, so I hit add to cart. Luckily for Best Buy, they implemented a new system that I wasn't used to, which was you had to wait a little bit before you can really attempt to add the device to your cart. Something that would likely defeat a decent amount of the bots that were going on right now. So I waited. And I added it to my cart. You won't believe how fast I checked out. I didn't even think about how much the card was. I just wanted to check out and just get that win. And after clearing it with my bank account and dropping over $1,600, I was the now proud owner of an RTX 3090 Founders Edition. But also, a little bit of buyer's remorse. That one component costs more than all the other devices combined. But, you know, that is the nature of the beast. And what a beast this PC is going to be. Of course, the RTX 3090 wasn't all sunshine and RGBs. This is a gargantuan card. I don't know if you understand the size that it would have to take up. And for a person like myself who wanted a micro ATX case, it's gonna be a tight squeeze. Not only that, the power supply was a 750 watt power supply, which technically should work with the 3090s, but there were a lot of people suggesting 850s and even higher than that. So what is a person to do than to upgrade your PSU? Can't really change that. Gonna need more wattage. Really can't get around that at all. However, I did stumble upon a YouTuber who actually had the exact same case that I had, the exact same power supply that I had, and the exact same GPU that I had. I cannot recommend them enough for a subscription. They are fantastic. They commented exactly what I needed. Definitely give them a follow. But fast forward to the last week of December in 2020, and all the components finally made it. Once I had all the components together, it was finally time to update the BIOS and the drivers. And I will say, if you are picking up this motherboard with a Zen 3 CPU, I will let you know, firmware P1.10 will boot up and will let you update and build and install Windows. But you'll want to update the firmware as soon as you can. I was having some issues with XMP at the time, but this might have been another issue. We'll talk about that soon. And updating the firmware seemed to help out a lot. When I ran with XMP with the old factory firmware, I ended up actually not being able to boot up into BIOS. So I had to clear the CMOS. Now, the unfortunate side to this is that the RTX 3090, without taking apart practically the entire case, would be difficult to clear that CMOS. I ended up having to tape a jumper to the end of a chopstick, and luckily for me, that was what I needed to clear the CMOS and get the firmware updated properly. Now, finally had everything going for me, and I booted up the first game and it crashed. This couldn't be. Like, why did it crash? This was supposed to be a $2,500 PC, and I was having so many issues. It was very disheartening, to say the least. At this point, it was time for Dr. Internet to help me out when troubleshooting the issue. At first, I thought it was a GPU issue, so I did a lot of things with GPU-Z, MSI Afterburner. I thought I can underclock the GPU, see if I can have it perform a little bit better, and it did help a little bit, but I still had crash to desktop issues. I also had CPU-Z and a hardware monitor, and I was double checking to see where could the issues have gone. So far, it seemed fine, according to those devices. I also had Heaven 4.0 Benchmark, I was running 3D Mark. Those seemed to be running for the most part, but I was still getting crashes in my games. So, what gives? I couldn't understand what I did wrong until I remembered XMP. Now, one thing I didn't try was disabling XMP, because why should I? I disabled XMP and the RAM started running at the slowest speed possible, 2433, and lo and behold, none of my games crashed. Turns out, the RAM components that I used is not on the QVL list for the ASRock motherboard that I have. So word to the wise, if you are using this ASRock motherboard, you'll want to stay on the QVL list. And in particular, I ended up replacing with 32 gigabytes of Crucial Ballistics memory with the same timings, DDR4 3200. It's not optimal, it's not 3600, but the amount of how much it would cost compared to what I was available to buy from my local micro center, is a lot better to go that route, in my opinion. Now, if you're like me, a schmuck who hasn't built a PC since the Haswell CPU days, then you probably aren't too familiar with the QVL, or the Qualified Vendors List. The Qualified Vendors List shows all of the components that a manufacturer will test with their device. Unfortunately, the Corsair RAM that I used did not qualify to be on that list because they probably didn't test it. It's probably going to be fine if I maybe put in the manual timings for this, but with Micro Center, I decided to just return it, get the Crucial RAM. Anyways, finally put in the RAM, and boom, I had the PC of my dreams. It's amazing to work with this PC. In fact, I started tinkering around with other MSI Afterburner settings. Now I'm still tweaking the settings in MSI Afterburner to try to find the right recipe for my specific card, but I will say that having it for the past couple of days, testing things out, it's just been a blast. And I am excited to show you, finally, all the charts and settings that I had when I ran certain games. routinely, my PC was doing 95% better than most PCs that were running these test benches. So I'm a pretty happy camper, if I do say so myself. I mean, it's looking super bright for Oatmeal 2.0 and my new workhorse PC. I'm excited to play more games on it. I'm excited to do more content with it. Now, if you're in the market for buying a component, let me give you these several tips that should help you out. 1, have a plan A component that you want in mind, but also consider some alternate plan B components. Sometimes you won't get the component that you want, but you'll have to settle with what's just around. And in that case, be ready to make those pivots when you need to, because these components will sell out fast. If you don't act quick, you will lose the chance at potentially a whole year of not gaining access to that component. 2, set a goal price budget and stick to it. I relatively had this in mind, but I didn't have it completely set in stone. If I was really hell-bent on having a 3080, I would have stuck with it, stayed with the 3080, let it ride out, and if I needed to, still had my old GPU ready to go, give me most of the gaming that I really needed anyways. Once again, make sure to follow the Stock Drops Discord, as well as follow the Stock Drops Twitter bot account, because that is going to be indispensable for you to get that component, and that's how I was able to get the notifications for Best Buy. While you're at it, make sure all of your account information on all of these tech websites that sell these components is updated. The last thing you want is to send your component that you worked so hard on to your old home address, or you didn't use the right credit card information. In fact, when it comes to the banks, be sure to have those apps ready just in case if there's any fraud alerts, because that certainly happened for me, and I'd hate for it to happen to you and for you not to realize that was the reason why you lost out on a chance for a sweet, sweet RTX card. Step 6, if there is a Micro Center in your area, utilize them. They're a fantastic store. If you don't have a Micro Center near you, maybe Fry's, I guess, would be the next best thing, although they've kind of dipped down as of recently. I'm sure there's other tech companies that would be around you that you can probably buy from, but Micro Center, fantastic. Can't recommend them enough. And finally, step 7, be patient. It's not a race. No one cares if you get the right component now versus later. And if the newer devices start coming out, it's already going to outdate what we have on the market today. If you can survive with the devices that you have now, why not run with that? If you need to build a new PC now, why not buy the older gen GPUs, run with it for a couple of years, and then once it's ready to buy into the new GPUs, do it. Honestly, that would be my strategy now if I didn't already land a 3090. But at this point, what's there left to say? I have a fantastic PC. This was a great time and build for me. I had such a blast, and despite having to troubleshoot all of these weird issues with it, it ended up with a PC that I can proudly look at every single time I start up my computer and just remind myself of the diligence that I can have to make things happen. And now that I have this PC, I'm excited for you to see what's in store for this year.